would like to just officially welcome everybody to the Flint Farm. Thank you so much for coming on this beautiful day and on this wonderful occasion that we have of getting behind Barry Loudermilk and getting him where we need him in Washington. And I'll without further ado, turn the program over to Barry Loudermilk. Thank you, Barry.
Wow, what a great day to be outside in Waleska, Georgia. And first, I want to thank so much to Dr. and Mrs. Flint for all your support in opening up your beautiful home for us. Give them a round of applause for allowing us to be out here today. Now, he is responsible for the facilities, for the home, for the property, but not the weather. That just came in as an added bonus, but we do know who is responsible for the weather, and we want to thank God for making such a beautiful day in Northwest Georgia. Also, let's give a round of applause to the Fish and Picks for all the fine music. That's just incredible. And we're going to hear some more from them here in a few minutes, but I just want to take a couple minutes of your time. We're not going to have a long campaign political speech. You've heard enough of those. In fact, I've been telling people, as many of you know, we teach the Constitution through our nonprofit, and we like to get down to the basics of what things really mean and the basics of the ideas of our founding fathers. And we even break down the individual words that are used in our Constitution, and I think it's important we understand some things. For instance, the word politics. Poly means many, and ticks are blood-sucking parasites. And I think that Washington has been invaded by a lot of blood-sucking parasites in the past several years, and it's time for us to take back our country. As we're out here tonight, one of the great things of today has reminded me, especially as we were getting ready over the past week, just thinking about today and being out in the outdoors, just kind of kicking back, enjoying the nature, the beauty of God's creation, and just kind of taking things easy for a while. It's been a great break for our family to do this, but I was thinking of how when I was a child, this is a lot like what life was. It was carefree. I remember as a child thinking how great America was because you had the ability to achieve anything that you wanted to achieve. There was no limit. But now, as you talk to the young people today, their thoughts are, what will government allow me to do? I told a group the other day, as I was thinking about life as a child in Sunday school, in almost every level of Sunday school, we had a little chart on the board. And it said, God first, others second, and self last. And that was the ideas and the principles that we grew up by. God first, others second, and self last. My dad and my mom instilled in me a set of principles we passed on to our children is very similar. That my dad said, put God first in everything you do, serve others before yourself, and standing for what is right isn't always easy, but it is always the right thing to do. And I started thinking about how when we were growing up, those core principles, God first, others second, self last, how we've turned those upside down today. Today in Washington, D.C., the idea is put self first, let government take care of others, and if we get God out of the way, then we don't have to worry about him anymore. But now is the time to turn things back around. What is great is as we started this campaign, I told our campaign team, everyone knows America is messed up, that there is a lot of things wrong with this nation, but I believe we can turn this nation around. I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe because I know our history, and when we pull together as a people, there is not a challenge that we cannot overcome. And now is the challenge. Now is the time that we have to stand up. Now is the time. It is not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. But we can do this. We have to do it. As I think about when I was a child, life was so different. When I would go to school, a pocket knife was part of every boy's attire. We never went anywhere without a pocket knife. I would get up on Saturday mornings and I would go outside the house, never put on a pair of shoes, and we would do the craziest things that people just think are totally wild today. We rode bicycles without helmets and knee pads and elbow pads. And sometimes we even rode them barefooted. And you know what? We skinned our knees, we skinned our feet, we got bumps and bruises, but that was okay because it was no one else's fault but our own. We look to ourselves, and that's what is great about America and our culture. As we look to ourselves, we can turn this thing back around. It's the individual spirit, the identity of Americans that make us great, that make us unique from every other nation in the world, is the idea of American exceptionalism. There is not a challenge that we cannot overcome. When we put our eyes back on God and we do for ourselves. In fact, during the signing of the Declaration of Independence, or actually during the debate, as the Founding Fathers were debating whether or not to declare war on the most powerful nation on the face of the earth, which is inevitably what they were doing, Benjamin Rush, one of the delegates, leaned over to John Adams and he said, "Do you actually think we will be successful in this battle against Great Britain?" John Adams leaned over to him and said, "Yes. If we turn our eyes back on God and ask Him to forgive us of our sins, then yes, we can be successful." That sentiment was written in the last line of the Declaration of Independence because, and I want to bring that up here today, because it is so important, because the words of the Declaration of Independence, as it says in the very document, was not just written for then, it was written for future generations. It is the blueprint of this nation. It is the blueprint of the character of Americans. Because these founding fathers knew what they were trying to do was impossible. To take on the most powerful military force in the history of the world with what was known as Washington's ragtag rabble and Washington's country clowns. It was impossible. But they knew what they were trying to attempt was impossible, but they also knew who achieved the impossible. And they closed out that very document with these words: "And in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." What they were saying is, we know what we're trying to do is impossible, but we believe that we're following God's providence. And if we follow Him and we dedicate ourselves to what we're doing, then we will be successful. We find ourselves in a very similar situation as our founding fathers did. When you look at it, in fact, if you look at the top 15 issues today, they're identical to the top 15 issues in 1776. And they overcame it. We can overcome. We can take this nation back. And we can turn this nation that was designed to be a government of the people, which Washington has turned it into a government over the people. We can take our nation back. And if you've noticed, I said we. Because if you send me to Washington and expect me to do it, you're going to be disappointed. Because all I am is the voice of the people. And it's going to take all of us working together. But I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we can do this because we are Americans and we're proud of our heritage. But more importantly, our children and grandchildren deserve better than what we're passing on to them. As I talk to my children, I tell them about what life was like when I was a young child. They tell me, "Dad, that's what I want. I just want the America that you had." I was speaking to a group of college students recently, and I asked them, I said, "How many of you believe that you will be able to achieve the American dream?" And out of that entire room, only 2 people raised their hand. They had lost hope. But we can show them we deserve to give them better, and we can do this. Let me close with a story that inspires me, and even as many times as I've told this story, I still get inspiration from it because it shows the true character of American exceptionalism. And it shows how exceptionalism can achieve the impossible when you put your eyes upon your cause and not the circumstances around you. And it also shows what one person who believes in their cause can achieve. And the story goes back into World War II during the Battle of the Bulge, when Germany had pushed through the Siegfried Line and was basically decimating all of our units as they were moving through the Ardennes. There was what was known as the Great GI Bug Out. GIs were on a mass retreat all through the Ardennes trying to get back to the American, back to two towns of St. Vith and Bastogne, where Eisenhower had sent the 82nd Airborne to St. Vith and the 101st Airborne to Bastogne with the orders to hold those towns at all cost. It was a superior force of tanks and artillery. America's and the Allied forces were in air power, but there were blizzards and overcast skies. We were not able to even resupply our units. As the Germans would push through towns, they were actually massacring many of our soldiers instead of taking them prisoner. They were just running through our soldiers like a hot knife through butter. There was one tank commander. As he was driving through a town, other soldiers kept jumping onto his tank because they were fleeing from the full force of the German army. And this tank commander, he was on a gravel road not too far out of the town of St. Vith. He said he came upon a lone soldier, a Private Martin. He was out in the middle of the forest by himself, digging a foxhole with his M1 carbine threw over his shoulder. The tank commander stopped. Of course, he's the only person around that he can see anywhere. The tank commander stops and he opens his hatch and he hollers over him, "Private, is this the way to the rear?" So Private Martin stood up. He looked over at the tank commander and he said, "Sir, are you looking for somewhere safe?" He said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, then pull that tank behind me. I'm 82nd Airborne. This is as far as the Germans are going to get." One soldier, so dedicated to his cause, he didn't consider the circumstances. He was willing to take on the entire German army of panzer tanks and artillery with nothing but a rifle because he believed in his cause. It was impossible. But what happened is it so inspired that tank commander. He said, "Boys, this is where we're going to make our stand." And he turned the tank around, and the rest of the column that was coming down the road, they said, "This is where we'll make our stand." And the next unit that came down the road, they heard of Private Martin. They said, "This is where we'll make our stand." And it became a stronghold during the Battle of the Bulge that the Germans never penetrated. I believe the spirit of Private Martin is still alive in the people that are sitting out here today who have had the vision of America. All we have to do is tap into it and bring hope to the next generation that we can take this nation back and give us a nation, one nation under God that our children will have is free, safe, and full of opportunity. And I'll close with this, Most candidates will get up and they'll tell you the top 5 reasons to vote for them. Well, let me do something a little different. Let me give you some reasons not to vote for me. If you're happy with the status quo, the way things are going in Washington, then you probably don't want to vote for me. If you want somebody who's going to go to Washington to go there just to get along and keep going the direction things are going, then you don't want to send me to Washington. If you want to continue down the path that we're going, where we're losing our liberties, our economy is unstable because we have a Congress that cannot live within its own means, then you probably don't want me to go, because I believe we can turn this nation around, but only when we go and stand. But if you want to join together with us to take this nation back, then thank you for your help to get to Washington, D.C. I want to thank you for being here. This is a great event. It's wonderful to have all these folks out here. I want to say God bless you and God bless America. And next, I think we're going to